They found Marcus Cole at 2:47 a.m. on a Saturday morning. The door to his studio was locked from the inside. The deadbolt was engaged. The single window, the small rectangular one facing the sycamore tree on Sycamore Lane, was sealed shut with weather stripping he had installed himself 3 years ago. He was slumped forward in his chair. His Sennheiser HD 280 Pro headphones were still on. The scarlet red of the ear cups caught the flashlight beam first, then the stillness of his hands, still resting on the armrests of the chair. His eyes were open. His mouth was slightly parted, as if he had been interrupted mid-sentence. The microphone was still armed. On his screen, the waveform continued for another 47 minutes of silence after his heart stopped. 47 minutes of the room recording nothing. Except for one thing. At the 34-minute mark, the waveform showed a single spike. A word, barely audible. The forensic audio analyst would later describe it as a whisper placed directly against the microphone grill. The word was submitted. Marcus Cole was not a man who feared the dark. He made his living in it. At 34, he was exactly where he wanted to be. 5 years ago, he had quit his job as a sound engineer for a local radio station in Harper's Hollow, Pennsylvania, and started The Hollow Frequency, a weekly horror podcast broadcast from a converted spare bedroom on the second floor of his house at 214 Sycamore Lane. The show had a modest following, 12,000 subscribers, nothing enormous, but loyal. The kind of listeners who sent handwritten letters and remembered his wife's name. He loved it. Genuinely, unironically loved it. You could hear it in the way he introduced each episode, never reading from a script during the cold open, just talking to the microphone like it was a friend who had stopped by late. On recording nights, which were always Thursdays, he had a ritual. Between 7 and 8 in the evening, he would transform the spare bedroom into a recording space. This meant drawing the blackout curtains, heavy velvet, the color of dried blood, and positioning the 2 acoustic panels directly behind his chair. The panels were charcoal gray, arranged in a diamond pattern that his wife Lila said looked like a conspiracy theory wall. He always laughed at that. His microphone was a Shure SM7B, matte black, mounted on a Rode PSA-1 boom arm that he had positioned so the mic hung just below eye level. He liked it there because he could read from his laptop screen without the mic body blocking his view. The mic wore a dark windscreen, the thick foam kind that made it look like a severed storm cloud hovering in front of his face. Before every recording, he would tap it twice with his knuckle. A habit. 2 soft thuds. Then, testing, testing, the dead are listening. A joke he had made 100 times. He always wore the same thing on recording nights, a faded gray hoodie, the one with the small coffee stain on the left cuff, and a pair of Sony MDR-7506 headphones resting around his neck until he was ready to monitor. His jeans were always the same pair too, dark wash, worn at the knees, comfortable. His wedding ring caught the desk lamplight whenever he adjusted the gain knob on his Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 interface, which sat to the right of his keyboard next to a coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Podcaster." His wife Lila and their 4-year-old daughter Sophie were not home on recording nights. Every Friday morning, Lila drove Sophie to her mother's house in Glenwood, 2 hours north, and they stayed until Saturday afternoon. It had started when Sophie was an infant. Lila's mother was lonely after her husband passed, and the weekly visits became sacred. Marcus stayed behind because Thursday nights were for recording, and Friday nights were for editing, and by Saturday afternoon, when his girls walked back through the front door, the episode was done and he was all theirs again. He liked the quiet of the empty house. the way the floorboards settled, the way the refrigerator hum traveled up through the walls and became part of the silence he recorded in. On the night of March 14th, a Thursday, 40 degrees, light rain against the window, Marcus Cole sat down to record episode 204 of The Hollow Frequency. He tapped the mic twice.
Testing, testing. The dead are listening.
The segment was called Listener Stories. Once a month, Marcus would read submissions sent in by his audience. Short horror stories, personal experiences, strange encounters. He loved the segment. It was the closest thing to a conversation he had on the show. That night, he had 3 submissions queued up. The first 2 were unremarkable. A haunted attic in Ohio, a sleep paralysis account from a college student in Vermont. Standard fare, competently written, nothing he hadn't read before. The third one was different. The subject line read, "For episode 204, read this one." The email address was a string of characters that meant nothing. hollowfreak.listener.204@gmail.com. A burner address, which wasn't unusual. Listeners sometimes created anonymous accounts for submissions. What was unusual was the writing. The story described a horror podcast host, unnamed, who was found dead in his recording studio on a Saturday morning. The door was locked from the inside. The headphones were still on his head. Marcus read the first paragraph aloud, his voice settling into the cadence he used for narration. Slower, lower, the gravel in his throat deepening.
I read about a podcaster who recorded from a converted bedroom on the 2nd floor of his house. The room was treated with charcoal gray acoustic panels arranged in a diamond pattern behind his chair. There was one window, a small rectangle, facing an old sycamore tree. He recorded on a Shure SM7B, matte black, on a boom arm, and he wore a gray hoodie with a coffee stain on the left cuff.
Marcus stopped reading. He looked at his hoodie. He looked at the acoustic panels behind him. He looked at the window. The sycamore tree, bare branches wet with March rain, silhouetted against the amber streetlight. He laughed. A short, uncertain laugh. The kind you make when you're alone in a house and you hear something you can't immediately explain.
That's oddly specific,
he said into the microphone.
Someone's been paying attention to the YouTube channel.
But the YouTube channel had never shown his hoodie. He didn't film himself. The podcast was audio only. The only people who had been in this room were Lila, Sophie, and a cable technician 18 months ago who had spent 10 minutes replacing a splitter and left. He finished reading the submission. The story ended with the podcaster slumped forward in his chair. His Sennheiser HD 280 Pro headphones, scarlet ear cups, the exact model and color Marcus was wearing around his neck at that very moment, still clamped over his ears. Cause of death, undetermined. Marcus removed his headphones and set them on the desk. He did not finish the episode that night. Before going to bed, he opened Gmail and typed a reply. "Who is this?" The message bounced. The address did not exist. Not inbox full or account suspended. It simply was not a valid address. Gmail's automated response was clinical. The email account that you tried to reach does not exist. He checked the original email again. It had arrived at 11:47 p.m. on Wednesday. The timestamp was real. The headers were valid. The email had come from somewhere, but the address it came from did not exist. 1 week later, Thursday, March 21st. Lila and Sophie had left that morning for Glenwood, as always. Sophie had waved from the car window with a stuffed rabbit in her hand. Marcus had stood on the porch in his bathrobe, coffee steaming in the cold air, and waved back until the taillights disappeared around the bend of Sycamore Lane. He had not told Lila about the email. He had told himself it was a prank, a dedicated listener with a dark sense of humor who had done some research, maybe found old photos on a forgotten social media account. He had almost convinced himself. Almost. He sat down to record episode 205 at his usual time, but first he checked the show's submissions inbox. He had received 17 new emails. 16 were normal. The 17th had the subject line, "For episode 205. Read this one." The sender address was hollowfreak.listener.205@gmail.com. Marcus stared at the screen for a long time before opening it. The email was short, 3 sentences. Tomorrow morning, a FedEx package will arrive at 214 Sycamore Lane. The package will contain nothing. The driver will not remember delivering it. He closed the laptop. He walked downstairs. He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey, the Lafroig he saved for special occasions, and he sat in the dark living room with all the lights off, listening to the rain. At 9:17 a.m. the next morning, Friday, the doorbell rang. The FedEx driver was a young man with a forgettable face. He handed Marcus a small brown box, asked for a signature, and left. Marcus opened the box in the kitchen. It was empty. Not contained packing peanuts empty. It was clean. A box with nothing in it. No invoice. No return address beyond a generic FedEx distribution center in Pittsburgh. He called FedEx. They confirmed the tracking number was valid. They confirmed the package had been picked up. But when he asked who had sent it, the representative went quiet for a moment, then said,
"Sir, the sender field on this label is blank. That shouldn't be possible."
He should have left the house. He should have called Lila, driven to Glenwood, held his daughter, and never returned to 214 Sycamore Lane. But Marcus Cole was a man who believed in explanations. There was always a rational answer. There was always a logical chain of events. The email address that didn't exist, that was a glitch, a routing error, a spoof. The package, a coincidence, a cruel prank. The specific details of his studio. Someone had been in the house. Someone had watched him. Someone was toying with him. And if someone was toying with him, he wanted to know who. At 11:14 p.m., he armed the microphone and began recording a message. Not an episode, a statement. His voice was different now, stripped of the performer's warmth. Just a man talking to whoever might find this.
If you're listening to this, if you're the one who sent those emails, I don't know how you know what you know. I don't know how you described my room, my clothes, my equipment, but I'm going to find out.
He paused. He looked at the interface. The gain levels were still active. The mic was still armed. But the room had gone dead silent in a way he had never experienced. Not just quiet, but absent, as if the air itself had stopped vibrating. He took off his headphones and listened. Nothing. No wind. No rain. No house settling. No refrigerator. He stood up. He walked to the door. He opened it, or tried to. The deadbolt was engaged. He had not locked it. He never locked it during recordings. The only other person in the house was a 4-year-old who was 2 hours away. He turned back to the desk. On the screen, a new email notification had appeared. The sender, hollowfreak.listener.206@gmail.com. The subject line, your turn. He did not open it. He sat down in his chair. He put his headphones back on, the scarlet Sennheisers pressing against his ears. Through the headphones, he heard something that should not have been possible. His own voice. A recording of himself, speaking words he had never spoken, describing a death he had not yet died. He slumped forward. His hands came to rest on the armrests. His eyes stayed open. His mouth parted slightly. The waveform ran for 47 more minutes. The Harper's Hollow Police Department closed the case after 6 months. The official report listed cause of death as cardiac arrest. Natural causes. No signs of forced entry. No evidence of foul play. The email addresses were never traced. Google confirmed that the accounts hollowfreak.listener.204, 205, and 206 did not exist and had never existed. There were no server logs, no IP addresses, no metadata. The emails had simply arrived. Lila sold the house on Sycamore Lane in the fall. The new owners converted the spare bedroom into a nursery. They painted over the charcoal acoustic panels without ever knowing what they were for. The case file remains open, technically. A formality, a bureaucratic reflex. But there is one detail the police report does not mention. One thing the detectives could not explain and chose to omit. On the night Marcus Cole died, his microphone recorded 47 minutes of silence after his heart stopped. But at the 34-minute mark, and the audio analyst confirmed this, swore to it, then quit his job 2 weeks later, the waveform showed a single word, whispered directly against the grill. Submitted.